Hello everyone and welcome back to a new video. Battlefield 5 has a lot of settings to personalize your game experience. I will go through all the available settings, explain them and give some recommendations, especially for beginners of Battlefield 5. Let's start with the controls. Here you can customize your sensitivity and controller settings. When you turn on invert vertical look, you will look up by pressing the control stick down and the other way around. I wouldn't recommend to turn this on unless you play with this option for a few years already. The soldier aim sensitivity specifies how sensitive your aim stick will react when pushed. When you come from Battlefield 1, I would recommend to choose a sensitivity 10% lower than your Battlefield 1 sensitivity, then it should feel similar. If you're new to Battlefield, start with the default sensitivity and turn it up by 10% when it feels too slow. When you got used to the new sensitivity and it still feels too slow, turn it up by 10% again, and so on. Always take your time to get used to a new sensitivity before changing it again. Don't change your sensitivity over and over again, that will ruin your muscle memory. The sensitivity also depends on your personal playstyle and your controller. If you use a SCUF or Xbox Elite controller, you might need a lower in-game sensitivity as the sticks react more sensitive already. With the soldier zoom aim sensitivity, you adjust your aim down sight sensitivity. If it's on 100%, your soldier aim sensitivity and the zoom sensitivity are the same. I would recommend to turn it down to 90%, especially when you prefer to play with self-loading rifles and scopes. My recommendation for the next options is soldier sprint to toggle, double tap forward off, soldier weapon zoom and steady scope to hold. The vehicle aim sensitivity is personal preference again. I set mine to the same as the soldier sensitivity, but it can be higher or lower depending on your playstyle. Vehicle zoom should be on toggle. Invert vertical flight is the same as vertical look. It switches the up-down direction. Try to fly a plane with the default setting and see if it fits for you. If it doesn't, change this option. The controller button mapping can be customized for soldier, tank, gunner and more. Start with the default settings and change it when you miss something. I'm using the custom controller setting for the soldier as I switched melee attacks from the stick to the B button, switched crouch from B to the stick and changed the button mapping for steady scope from the left stick to my ADS trigger button, which is the left trigger for me. That helps you to steady your scope immediately when aiming down sight with a sniper rifle without pressing an additional button. In advanced settings, you can find more options to fine-tune your soldier and vehicle aim controls. Aiming acceleration gives you the ability of an additional acceleration when pushing the aiming stick all the way. Set this to 0 if you prefer the Battlefield 4 experience with no acceleration, and to 100 if you prefer the Battlefield 1 experience with full acceleration. I would recommend to set it to 0 no matter if this is your first Battlefield game or not, because the stick movement will feel much more consistent. Uniform soldier aiming means that you will have the same movement feeling no matter which field of view or weapon zoom you use. Turning your soldier or aiming and turning will always feel the same no matter if you have a pistol or a sniper rifle. Otherwise, turning with 1x zoom would be faster than turning with the 3x scope, which would mess up your muscle memory. So of course I recommend to turn this on, but use the default coefficient. The same for the vehicle aiming. Turn the acceleration down to 0, turn on uniform soldier aiming and use the default coefficient. The vehicle controls are basically personal preference, but can also be tricky when you chose the wrong settings. Aim relative controls are turned on by default. That means a tank will move into the direction the camera is aiming, which is also the direction your turret is turning. So if you press the stick forward, the tank will move into the aiming direction of the turret. When you turn this option off, the tank will always move into the direction of its own heading, no matter where you aim. This might be confusing for some players, but could be a good option for others. I would recommend to turn it on when you are new to Battlefield, or you are only driving a tank every once in a while. If you want to try the other setting, use the practice range to find out if this option is the right one for you. I would also recommend to turn on decouple aiming from turning for passenger and driver. That means the crosshair will always stay on target and in the direction you are aiming, no matter if the vehicle is turning or not. This gives you the ability to turn or move your tank to avoid enemy fire, while keep aiming at enemy soldiers or vehicles. Next up, you can choose the zoom sensitivity for different magnifications. Use the default settings for every option if the aiming feels good for you. I personally only changed the sensitivity for the 6x scope as I use this on my sniper rifles. This option lowers the zoom sensitivity a little bit more for the scopes, which gives me the ability to aim more precise on long range. The same for the vehicle sensitivity. Use the default settings if you get along with them and only change them if necessary. The next options are a bit more interesting. the soldier and vehicle aim ratio. This adjusts the ratio of vertical and horizontal aim sensitivity. Set to 100%, the left-right sensitivity will be the same as the up-down sensitivity. I would highly recommend to set this to a value of about 50%, which means the up-down movement will be only half as fast as the left-right movement. If you set it too high, you will more likely over-aim. If you set it too low, you can't look up or down fast enough. Everything around 50% should be fine. Next up is the controller tuning. Vibration is turned on by default. Turn it off if you don't want a controller feedback. I wouldn't recommend to do this, but some players prefer this option. With the next options, you can change the dead zone and input of the two control sticks. With the dead zone, you set how much the stick needs to be moved to be activated. Set this to something between 10 and 15%. 15% is fine for the axial dead zone. The center dead zone should be a bit lower. I wouldn't recommend to go lower than 10% because depending on the quality of your controller, your crosshair will start moving on itself even if you don't move the stick. The input threshold should always be on 100% because then you will only have the maximum input when the stick is moved all the way. Set it to a lower value to reach the maximum input with lower physical movement, but I wouldn't recommend this. The trigger input is different. Here I would highly recommend to lower the default value. Set the dead zone for both triggers to 0 for an immediate reaction to your trigger movement. The input threshold should be between 10 and 20%. A higher input means that you have to pull the trigger more before your weapon starts shooting. So the lower the input value, the better. But I wouldn't recommend to set the value lower than 10% because when you trigger a weapon, you might accidentally not fully release the trigger. If your input is set to 0 and you don't fully release the trigger, your weapon won't shoot anymore as the game doesn't recognize another input. So something between 10 and 20% should be fine for both triggers. Let's head over to the gameplay options. The HUD elements should always be shown. Only hide them when you want to do something cinematic or screenshots with clean gameplay. Because if you turn off the HUD, you won't see any objectives, no minimap, nothing. You can't even tell your teammates from the enemies anymore. It looks pretty nice without all the overlays, but it's not really helpful for your gameplay experience. The HUD is also slightly moving when your soldier moves. Usually players don't really recognize it, but in case you don't like it, turn it off. Player created content are emblems, platoon names and so on. If you don't want to see that, turn it off as well. The chat log can be set to hide, show or when active. I prefer to see it when active or turn it off completely as it takes even more space on the screen. That's why I also wouldn't recommend to magnify the in-game chat, especially because the chat is not very important on console as you can't write in it. Inventory should be shown when active as it also needs too much space when shown all the time. I wouldn't recommend to hide it as you won't be able to see your amount of ammo or the reload hint anymore. The kill log is just like the chat, personal preference. I am not really interested to see who was killed with which weapon, where and why. If you like to see it, turn it on. You can then choose if you want to see everything, nearby, team, squad or only yourself. You can also set how you want to see the used weapon or gadget. Only the icon, the full name or both, icon and name. The next options can stay on and shown. The vehicle seat info should be on so you can see who is the gunner in your tank or plane. I would recommend to show critical messages as well as they will inform you if there are any server or connection issues or if your ping is too high or inconsistent. There's also a slight shadow underneath the HUD and UI elements that you can turn stronger if necessary. If you have problems with the visibility of some of the HUD elements, higher the value of this. Next up, you can customize your crosshair visibility and color. I prefer to go with red as it works pretty well on all maps, but this is personal preference. The visibility should be on 100%. Since the last update, you can also choose the glow and color of the reflex, niter and leti sights. So basically all sights that are not scopes or iron sights. I would highly recommend to turn the glow up to 100% for the best visibility of the sights even on snow and sand maps. The color is personal preference again. I like to go with a bright green, but I guess red would be a good choice as well. You can also customize color, shape and visibility of the hit markers, what I also highly recommend. Choose bright colors that are easy to make out and give you the ability to tell the kind of damage you deal just by the color. The visibility should be on 100% again, unless you want a more hardcore battlefield experience. The damage-based shape should be turned on as well, so the hitmarker shape changes when you deal soldier or vehicle damage or when you do a kill. The minimap customization is basically the same as in Battlefield 1. You can choose the texture opacity, which allows you to see more or less details on the map. For maximum landscape details, choose 100%, for no landscape details, choose 0. Something around 50% is the best decision in my opinion. If you don't want the minimap to rotate with you, turn this option off. But for new players, I would recommend to let the map turn with your view, as this helps you to orientate easier. The map's zoom radius specifies how much you are able to see on the map. Keep the default values for flight and vehicle zoom, but turn down the soldier zoom radius to about 80% for better visibility of your surroundings on the map. A higher zoom radius will show you more of the map, but less details. A lower zoom radius shows you a lot of details close to you, but not more. So something between 80 and 100% is the best value. For the minimap size, I would recommend 100 so you can still see enough of the minimap, but it doesn't take too much space on the screen. And I would also recommend to show all stationary weapons and not only the heavy ones. So you will be able to see stationary MGs as well and not only field guns or AA guns. Last but not least, there is the icon opacity. Here you can customize the visibility of objective icons, teammate and enemy icons, and gadget icons. I wouldn't recommend to turn these values lower than 80% to make sure the visibility is still good. Everything below 80% could be too transparent on some maps. You can turn down the opacity much more when you aim down sight, cause then you don't really need all these informations on the screen. Especially the objective and gadget opacity can be very low when aiming down sight. Something around 20% should be enough. In advanced gameplay options, you should turn everything on or show everything except for the network graph. Soldier auto lean and auto peek are very helpful and work perfectly in Battlefield 5, so there's no need to turn them off. If you would do it, your soldier wouldn't peek or lean anymore when you press the left trigger behind cover. I also recommend to leave parachute auto deploy on, as this will save your life when you accidentally spawn on a parachuting squad mate. Note that the auto deploy is not meant to work when you jump out of planes or from bridges. In these cases you still have to open the parachute on your own by pressing A on Xbox or X on PS4. The context-based order giving is only important when you are squad leader. If this option is turned on, you can easily give orders by pointing your crosshair at an objective icon and pressing the spotting button, which is RB on Xbox or R1 on PS4. I wouldn't recommend to turn it off. The plane chase camera roll is personal preference again. If this is turned on, the camera will roll with your plane and will stay static if turned off. If you're new to the game, stick to the default settings. If you use the planes regularly, you should get into the practice range and try both options. The next option is the aim assist slowdown. I would recommend to use it when you are new to the game, but you will also find out that the aim assist can be really annoying sometimes. If this is the case, turn it off and see if you get along better without it. Take your time to get used to it. It might feel a bit weird in the beginning, but if you want full control of your aim, you're definitely better without the aim assist. The reload hint and hint system should be shown when you just started to play the game and you aren't used to the mechanics yet. Once you got used to it, you can turn the hint system off. The network performance graph is only interesting if you have network issues or bugs that you want to report to EA. It shows a lot of info like server tick rate, latency, packet loss and so on that are helpful for the devs to eliminate issues. But if it's not needed, the graph should be hidden. The aim lead indicator should be shown, as it tells you when you have to compensate a high ping by leading your aim. If this indicator shows up when you usually have a good ping, you know that you either have network issues or you accidentally chose a server far away from you. The audio options in Battlefield 5 are pretty simple and there's not much to explain. I would definitely recommend to turn down the music volume to 50% or lower, as the music at the beginning and the end of a round is pretty loud and distracting. The audio output is pretty much self-explaining. Choose the type you have or stay on auto if you're not sure or if you don't care. I prefer to go with surround and headset, as this works best for me. If you want to have a sound focused on chaos, explosion and destruction, go with the war tapes. If you prefer to hear more footsteps, choose the night mode instead. I wouldn't recommend to choose 3D headphones, as this setting sounds really strange and you are not able to hear the positions of your enemies better than with any other option. The announcer language is your preferred language and the in-game announcer should be on, unless you are not interested to hear what's going on during a match. If you want to talk to friends or your squad mates with the in-game voice chat, turn VoIP on. If you don't want to talk or hear your squad mates, turn it off. Subtitles on or off is personal preference as well. And last but not least, there are the video options. Brightness on 50% should be fine. If you turn it up too much, the game will be too bright, especially on the snow maps. If you turn it down too much, you won't see anything in the shadows or inside buildings. The brightness also depends on your monitor settings and your console settings, so 50% is what I recommend. If you have problems with soldier visibility, I would also recommend to set your console to PC RGB. This will result in a more contrasty picture, but it only works when you're using a monitor, not a TV. The field of view changes how much you can see of your surroundings. With a low field of view, things will appear closer to you, but you won't see much around you. With a high field of view, you will have some kind of fisheye effect. You can see much more of your surroundings, but targets will be further away as well. I recommend a field of view between 65 and 75, which is a good compromise. Only the vehicle field of view should be on maximum value, as this gives you the ability to see as much as possible around your vehicle. And especially in planes, a low field of view is a problem, as the plane will cover half of your screen. So better go with a high field of view here. The ADS field of view is personal preference. When you turn it on, you will have the exact same field of view when aiming down sight and when not aiming. Which means with a one-time sight, both field of views are the same, and the field of view will only change when your weapon zoom is higher than one time. If you turn this option off, the field of view will zoom in every time you aim down sight, no matter which kind of sight you use. I personally prefer to have the same field of view all the time, so I turn this option on. The ADS depth of view is a nice little detail that I like to keep. If you turn it off, everything of your weapon will be sharp, no matter if it's close to you or not. When you turn it on, the close parts of your weapon will appear blurry. Motion blur and the other visual effects like chromatic aberration, film grain and lens distortion can be turned off. I only prefer to turn the vignette on because the darker frame moves the focus a little bit more to the middle of the screen. And last but not least, there's the custom color settings. These are mostly made for colorblinds, but you can of course set your own colors as well. I prefer to go with Tritonopia because it doesn't change the colors of the in-game icons but makes them more intense, which makes it easier to tell the ally from the enemy at one sight. And that's all for today. I hope this guide helps you to find the right game settings. If you have any questions, feel free to tell me in the comments below. And if you liked the video, give it a thumb up and subscribe to the channel for more Battlefield content. Until then, thanks for watching, I am the Catwoman and you are awesome.